Hi, this is Catherine. This is Taking Tea with Catherine. This is peppermint lemon tea from Ahmad Tea, just because I wanted something nice and relaxing. So I've a haul today. Split my hauls into a few parts because, as usual, I did spend some time in Book Off recently, and I did a little bit of online book shopping too. Now, in case you haven't watched my haul videos, Book Off is a bookshop and other things shop in Midtown Manhattan, and they have a really great $1 book section. You can find a lot of good things, and sometimes you find things that are end up being duds, but for $1 you can take the risk. And then you also find other books that are just really well discounted, and I like the shop a lot. Not the shop itself, the building, but the books that can be had from it. So I decided today to focus on books that have something to do with New York. It may not be the only focus of the book, but somewhat New Yorkish. I just thought it would be a good way of dividing things up. There's a couple books here I got from Book Off that I don't feel as strongly as excited about it as I would like to, because I'm like, oh, I read reviews since I got them and they're not as beloved as I'd hoped. But you know what? We'll see where we go from there. I'll mention which ones they are when I get up to them. But I'll start with two books that I ordered online. One of them you've seen if you've watched my recent videos, because as always when I read 84 Charing Cross Road, I suddenly want to read more of Helene Hanf's books because I get in the mood. And last year I read a couple of them, and then this year I realized that there were a couple that I didn't have, and I had read years ago, but now they're even hard to find to check out of a library. So I thought, okay, I'll get copies of them, and now I have them. One I've already read more than halfway through since I got it in the mail, and that's Letter from New York from Helene Hanf. She did some BBC broadcasts, just basically saying, okay, this is my life in New York. And, just like a brief every month, I think it was, she would say, hey, this is what's been going on. This is what happens around the holidays. This is what it's like in my neighborhood. The dogs, the neighbors, the things that go on, the parades, that sort of thing. Which I like because some of it is nostalgia for me, things that happened when I was growing up. Even though I grew up in Queens, I'm a Queens girl. It's still somewhat relatable. Manhattan is a place unto itself, but Queens is not that far away. So there are some things in which, I'm very familiar with, and some things that are just so very part of living in Manhattan. Either way, I find it very interesting. And some things that just, that still happen, and some things that just don't anymore. If you're interested at all in New York, this might be interesting to you. I like it because she kind of translates certain words and currency for her British audience. So, which she was already an expert at communicating with British people at this point because she wrote all those letters to a British bookshop. So that's kind of fun. Yes, so the other one is Underfoot in Show Business, which was her earlier memoir from I think the 60s. Most of her career was in New York. She was originally from, I think, Philadelphia, but she spent almost all of her working life in New York City. So, and Broadway shows, that kind of thing she had some sort of involvement with, but not incredibly successful, so hence the title. So this is more of New York in, I would say, the 40s, 50s, 60s, which I like too. Now this is a book I also, I found for $1 in Book Off, so I thought it was worth a go. And this is, let's see, this was published I think in 98. This is called Portrait of Dr. Gache, I think that's how you pronounce it. The story of a Van Gogh masterpiece, Money, Politics, Collectors, Greed, and Loss, by Cynthia Saltzman. This is a well-known painting of Van Gogh, as most of them are, but it was a doctor that he had spent time with later on in his life, and he painted his portrait, and yeah, it's pretty famous. It was on the episode of Vincent and the Doctor from Doctor Who, because I had to mention Doctor Who at least once. But that was a pretty big episode, pretty well known episode, I should say. It's mentioned just briefly in the episode, and the reason why I'm mentioning it in terms of New York history is because this was in the Metropolitan Museum of Art for a good amount of time. I don't know if it is now. I haven't been to the Met Museum in a while, but I know at least it had been when I'd looked in there before. It's if you're gonna look for the most populated part of the museum, probably even now, go to the Impressionist section and then go to the Vincent van Gogh section, and yeah, you'll see a lot of people. So you probably, if it's not there anymore, it was at some point. So this was written in the 90s apparently, but it has a little inscription from a Cynthia, so it might be the author, but I don't know, because it was written in 2017, which is much later. For Catherine, best wishes. Different spelling than my name, but still. It's kind of like, well, now this Catherine has it. It's kind of nice, right? That it ended up, I don't know. Anyway, so now I'm going to get into the two books that I'm not so sure about now, but they're both $1 each, so again, worth the risk. But I do find lately I've not been batting 1,000 when it comes to picking up books about the rich people of New York. You know, the fortune people who are crazy rich, who are so rich that I can't even believe it kind of people. That sometimes I do okay with that, and sometimes I've struck out. But why am I using so many baseball metaphors? I do not know. But the first one I have here is Anne de Courcy's The Husband Hunters, Social Climbing in London and New York. So I thought, New York, you know. There you go. I mean, it's not all about New York, obviously, but a lot of these wealthy heiresses, just women who had tons of money, but kind of wanted to have a title, or their parents wanted them to have a title, so they would marry them to, you know, English lords and stuff, so that they would have a title, and these English lords who were kind of low on money would be able to get something out of the deal, which sounds like a terrible reason to get married, but, you know, entertaining sometimes. Downton Abbey was based on that, really. That ended up being a somewhat happy marriage, but I'm sure it varied. So I think this is probably going to be quite gossipy and, you know, that kind of thing. I have to be in the mood for that. Speaking of gossipy, I also got 740 Park, The Story of the World's Richest Apartment Building by Michael Gross, which sounds very much like a Gossip Girl type of thing, which I don't know. Again, I have to be in the mood for this. It talks about all the rich people that lived in this building, which is, I think, in the East 60th, well, East, because Park Avenue is East, but not everyone knows that. But Park Avenue just tends to have a lot of well-off people living there. It is just a pretty wealthy place to live or have office buildings. I have worked on Park Avenue many, many times, and doesn't mean I'm rich, but, you know, but living there is a whole other deal. And so they mentioned people, let's see, Rockefellers, Vanderbilts, Chryslers, some names that I don't quite recognize. Jackie Bouvier Kennedy, I know who that is. So that could be kind of cool. But I know this author, he can be a little bit oversharing, so we'll see. And if I don't care for it that much, it was $1. Sometimes I get in the mood for that sort of thing. So now moving off from, now I love New York history, including Gilded Age stuff. I like reading about the rich people of New York. I like reading about the working class people of New York. I also like to read a little bit about the poor people of New York. It's interesting to see what, the place that I've lived and worked my whole life, it's interesting to see the people who have passed through it, the people who have made it what it is today, kind of. And there are people who have influenced it in ways that cost them their lives, and they would have not chosen to have had any influence. And you could see that by the story of Triangle, the fire that changed America. David Von Drael, I think is how you pronounce his name. Sorry, excuse me, I got a little. So yeah, in one of the most honored books of the year, so we'll see about that. David Von Drael transports us to a beautiful spring day in March 1911. It's always a beautiful day. So that's like 110 years ago, almost, when 146 workers, most of them young immigrant women, lost their lives. Employees had just begun preparing to leave the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in New York's Greenwich Village when a fire broke out and within minutes consumed the building's upper 3 stories. It was the worst workplace disaster in New York City until 9/11. So, yeah, I mean, I remember hearing about this growing up before 9/11, and it sounded horrific. It still sounds horrific now. I mean, these poor women worked in such terrible conditions. Even if they didn't mind their jobs so much, they weren't paid very well, and they didn't have great benefits. And the least they could have done, I don't know why they kept certain exits locked and stuff, maybe because people were worried about theft or something. But such horrible, such a horrible outcome. A fire breaks out, and here you were just about to leave for the day, and maybe just go home and rest, or go see someone you love, or whatever was going to happen to you. And because I've read a lot about the lives of the women who died, and a lot of them just, they just have their own lives, and they're just working hard, and then this has to happen, and you die a horrible death. Just terrible. But it is important because a lot of workplace standards were changed after that. There were a lot of, I guess you would say, unions that might have come out of that, or just general laws, codes, whatever. When I've been, for most of my working life, I've been in offices that have had fire safety people come in and give advice, not advice, actual direction of how to get out of the building in case of a fire, what to do in case of a fire. And, even though there have been disasters, obviously, since then, there is a lot less risk now than there was in this instance. So this should be, I have to be in the mood for this too, because this could be very sad, but it's, they call it here social history. Sometimes it's important to read about things like that too. Now moving on to another well-known building in New York City, in Chelsea. Inside the Dream Palace, the life and times of New York's legendary Chelsea Hotel by Cheryl Tippins. People like Warhol, lots of musicians, lots of artists, people like that lived, died in this place. Now Chelsea Hotel, I think, has become like a luxury, I don't know if it's a luxury apartment building now or a luxury hotel, or I think it's being built. I don't know exactly the deal. I know I read about it recently. There are I think a few people, or at least there were a few people that were holding out and living there still of the past, but it used to attract a lot of sort of bohemian type people. I read Patti Smith's book, Just Kids. That was a lot of their time. Her and Mapplethorpe, what was his name? Living there, and it was fascinating. It was just so many characters. So that could be, it's more about the people that passed through it and the times, and it is kind of another example of how New York's changed a lot. Because this was, a lot of 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I guess, time period. I think Bob Dylan is mentioned. A lot of, obviously name dropping is going to happen. And nowadays you don't find situations like that. Manhattan's changed so much, and to live in a big portion of Manhattan now, including where Helene Hanff lived, which used to be place you could find places and still be a like a working person, a person who had a somewhat regular job or whatever, is very impossible. There are exceptions. There are places that are considered affordable housing, but it's not the same. Anyway, but I do like to read about the times in the past where it was a bit more like that. Now, even the boroughs, the outer boroughs as they call them, if you're not in Manhattan, you're from the outer. Yeah, whatever. Even here, rent is just, legendarily impossible in recent decades, but, people somehow still live in New York. I don't know how. I don't even know how I live here. But anyway, so those are the books that I have that I've brought home recently that are New York related. And yeah, I think that some of them I look forward to reading. Some of them I'm a little bit like, okay, at the moment they seem good, but I'm not sure now. Let me know if you've read any of these, or if you want to read any of these. If you have any questions about living in New York that is possible that I can answer. I don't know for sure, but you can ask. Yeah, if you have any experiences of living in New York, I know some of the booktubers that do Marilyn Maya Mendoza. Did I get that right? I love her. She grew up in New York and lives in Hawaii, and has lived in Hawaii for probably most of my life. And but it still sounds very much of it like a New Yorker. Probably has some great stories. And I love talking to old New Yorkers. I like talking to New Yorkers. Going about to start a Doctor Who episode now. New York. So yeah. Please comment down below if you have anything to say. If you like talking about books about history, books about New York, etc. If you like to talk, because sometimes it comes out. I am from New York. I don't have a very thick accent, but it's there. So please subscribe if you are interested at all. And all those things. This is Catherine at Taking Tea with Catherine. Have a lovely tea and bookville day. Goodbye.